The envelope hit the stair with a soft slide and stuck against my shoe. Suspicion tightened my fingers around the flap before I even bent to pick it up. A luxury car hummed at the curb, headlights off, engine idling like a low animal. I pushed the door open with my elbow, and the hallway smelled of old coffee and laundry detergent. The envelope was thick, the paper cheap, and when I slit it with my thumb, a silver locket fell into my palm, its chain tangled into a damp curl. I stood on the stoop with the locket in my hand because I could not make myself go back inside yet. I knew the weight of this object before I saw the stain, a crescent of brown, red crusted along the edge where the clasp met the metal. Fear moved sharp and precise under my ribs, then shifted into a second, colder thing, suspicion, because only someone who knew Dant would select that locket. My throat tightened. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear without deciding whether to go downstairs or run. The car's engine breathed. Someone was waiting for my next move. I thought of the locket as a private thing between us. The silver disc Dant had given me on a night when his hands were not flat with command, but unsteady in a way he hid. I thought of how I used to touch it when I needed proof that he existed. Now I sat with it in a cheap hallway under a single naked bulb. And the proof smelled faintly of tobacco and motor oil, because it had been out in the world it belonged to. My chest tightened into a decision. I slid back inside, closed the door and locked it. Rosa knocked once, hard enough to make the pictures on the wall rattle. I dropped the envelope onto the kitchen table and the locket slid across the wood with a thin, metallic sound. Rosa bent her head under the lamp without asking, "What is it?" she said. Her voice was quick, practical. She smelled of citrus and coffee, the travel mug still in her hand. "Someone left this," I said. I did not tell her where it came from, because I could not say Dante's name and not make the air heavier. I set the locket between us. Rosa picked it up with 2 fingers and held it like a coin she was testing. She turned the disc until the light hit a faint engraving on the back. An initial pressed into the metal where the signet ring had rested for years. She frowned, then lifted the chain and found a scrap of fabric folded inside the envelope. "This looks like wool," she said. "This edge is torn." "Where were you last night, Nora?" The question landed with the bluntness of a slap because I could not lie easily to Rosa. "At home," I said, "at my apartment." "Alone," my voice came small and flat. I tasted the coffee I'd been trying to finish since midnight. I slid my thumb over the dried stain and felt a small grit under the metal. Rosa's hands moved fast. "We call Matteo and ask what this means, or we call the police." She kept her voice level, efficient. "We do not let this sit with us." She used Dante's lieutenant's name as if it were a functionary switch we could flip. I closed my hand over the locket. "Call Dante," I said. Saying his name made the room colder, as if the lights had a different tone when he was mentioned. "Call Dante first. If it's him, I need him to say he didn't send it. If it's not him, I need him to explain why it was at a dead man's place." My sentences were short. Each one felt like stepping into a room with someone else already there. Rosa blinked. "You want me to call Dante?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "call him." There was an argument in her face, but she picked up her phone. We sat with the locket between 2 mugs until the line clicked, and then Dante's voice filled the kitchen through the speaker. "Nora," he said. He sounded contained and awake, a low velvet I could not scoop apart. "Where are you?" "At my apartment," I said, and the word had an edge I could not completely hide. "Someone left the locket. There's a scrap of fabric. There's dried blood." There was a pause. "Do not touch anything else. Dant, do not move the locket. Don't let anyone in. Stay there." "I'll come." His voice stayed even, but the space between words was no longer casual. It ordered the room. I told Rosa he was coming and she folded her mouth into a line. The car outside had gone silent when Dante arrived, but his presence moved through the building with a different kind of noise. Footsteps measured, a hand on the security keypad, the heavy lift of his coat. He slipped into my kitchen like someone who knew exactly where he would stand. He looked like a photograph I could not admit to owning. Precise hair, suit that fit his shoulders like armor, a gold watch glinting at his wrist. He did not smile. "Show me," he said. He reached for the locket with a motion that did not touch me. Rosa handed it to him. He held the silver between 2 fingers and turned it until the signet impression matched the light. He frowned minutely. "This was at a scene 2 nights ago," he said. "A man named Carlo Rossi." His voice stayed steady, but his jaw worked once, like a line of grit under his skin. "I didn't send this. I don't leave things to people who are outside of my orders." He did not name who might have motive. Rosa, the question that landed like a thrown stone. Who else would want to bring her into this? "Dante." She my name plainly. Dante's eyes flicked to me. Someone who wants you watched, he said. Or someone who wants us blamed. He folded his hands as if considering a ledger. We will look into Carlo. Matteo will check his contacts. Stay here tonight. Do not go out. That was an order and a promise all at once. A protection that smelled of control. Suspicion twisted into a second emotion by then, anger, because the choice Dante made fit the pattern of our old life. I had left to stop being chosen. I had left to carve out a small breathing room that belonged to me alone. Now the locket sat between us like a claim. I said, I need to know if you had anything to do with this, Dante. The words came out harsher than I planned. He looked at me long enough for silence to thicken. I didn't send it to you, Nora, he said. But if someone wanted you to feel like you were not safe without me, they had a clear plan. He set the locket on the table and slid a folded cloth toward me with the edge of his hand. His movements were exact. Outside, a car door closed with a soft metallic click. Dante's phone vibrated against his thigh. He glanced at it and then read the message without speaking. Matteo says a body was found tonight, he said. Carlo Rossi. The locket was on him. His voice did not rise. It only became more focused. We will trace who handled it. There was a thud in my chest like a small fist. The next morning I went to the coffee shop on Cedar to force a normal hour into the day. I ordered black coffee and opened the book I had been carrying for 2 months without reading. The neon sign from across the street threw a hard white rectangle across my lap. I felt watched before I saw the man at the window. A stranger with a camera phone tucked under his coat, thumb moving. He watched me as if he expected me to break. I put the book down, moved my cup, and paid without letting his gaze find me again. Rosa called while I walked home. Did you see anything? She asked. A man took my picture at the cafe, I said. My steps were short. He sent it to me an hour later. I tapped the screen with my thumb and opened the message. The photograph was framed so my back was visible more than my face. Me at the table, hand near the locket, shaped outline beneath my sweater, a smudge of light on my shoulder. The picture had a timestamp and the street corner outside my building in the background. There was another message attached. A single line of text. I read it aloud because silence seemed dangerous. We can make him yours or we can make you his. Decide. Rosa's mouth made a small O on the line. Call Matteo now, she said. Do not go anywhere alone today. Her tone cut off debate. Nora. We will go together if you need to move. I am leaving work. Stay indoors. She was already moving into action when she spoke. I hung up and the apartment felt like an exhibit with the locket behind glass. I put it back in the envelope and wrapped the chain around my fingers until my knuckles whitened. The phone vibrated again. This time the call was from Dante. His ringtone felt like a measure. Meet me at the garage under 9th Street in 20 minutes, he said. Neutral ground. Come alone if you can. If you cannot, bring Rosa. Tell me now. He kept his voice without description. I looked at Rosa and then at the locket. I will go by myself, I said. Saying it made my limbs warmer with a small fire. I could not explain why I had made that choice except that I wanted to watch him without witnesses. Rosa, wait for me outside the building. If anything happens, bring Matteo, she agreed. Dante's car sat under the fluorescent glare of the parking garage, black paint swallowing the light. He stepped out in a long coat, rain already gathering on its shoulders. He did not touch me right away. He held out his hands with empty palms. Nora, he said, show me everything you have. His voice had the velvet hold that folded the air. I handed him the envelope. His fingers brushed mine when he took it and I felt a small, undesired recollection of how his touch used to reconfigure the room. He did not seem to notice. He opened the envelope and pulled out the locket, the scrap of fabric, and then my own photograph that had been sent to me earlier. He glanced at the torn edge of wool and then at my face. This corner of wool is from a coat Matteo keeps for field work, he said, not ours. Someone planted this to connect you to the crime scene. Whoever wants this framed you specifically. He folded the photograph and slid it into his pocket. Stay with me tonight. Do not speak about the photo to anyone else. His instructions were short, precise. I said, why would someone want to frame me with Carlo Rossi? Dante did not answer me with words. He reached toward the garage wall where the security camera hung and pressed a small button. A grainy feed blinked on the metal. Carlo moved through 2 meetings before he died, he said. He met with people who were not ours. He did not mention names. He did not need to. He turned his face toward me and studied me the way he studied plans. Someone is closing a circle and wants you to be the visible end of it. We left the garage in silence and walked up to a car that smelled of cedar and leather. He opened the passenger door for me with a quiet motion and then settled into the driver's seat. The city slid by, neon and rain, while I watched the lane marking move. My hands never stopped returning to the envelope in my bag. The penthos entrance smelled like citrus cleaner and something floral that did not belong to the building's high glass. Dante led me through the foyer with an ice of courtesy that kept me from pulling away. Matteo met us by the stairwell, a broad man with a face that registered calculations before it showed warmth. Nora, Matteo. He nodded once. We brought something to show you. He handed Dante a thin envelope and Dante opened it with the same careful way he'd handled the locket. The photo that slipped out showed a figure in the alley as if caught by a neighbor's door camera. A woman with my coat, my silhouette, kneeling beside a body. The torn wool matched the edge in my hand. The room narrowed. That isn't me, I said, and my voice jumped on each word. My hands involuntarily went to my throat. It can't be me. I haven't been to that alley. I felt the heat leave my head and settle into a cool panic. Matteo put the photograph on the table like a hard fact. We found Carlo with this locket on him, he said. This photograph was taken 2 nights ago. Your coat is at the scene. Your locket was on him. Explain. His tone was matter-of-fact, clinical. I walked around the table because standing in one place made my ribs ache. I didn't go to an alley 2 nights ago, I said. I said my name like a proof. Rosa can confirm I was home. I felt the need to stamp out every possibility that breathed doubt. Rosa's voice came from the doorway then. She had been standing outside the suite with her hands clenched around her scarf. She was home, Matteo, she said. I stayed up and left at 5 this morning. I dragged coffee and 2 blankets upstairs because Nora wouldn't sleep. I can swear to that. Her voice was quick and precise. She looked at me when she spoke, then at Dante. Dante's face did not shift. His hands folded in front of him. We will check the timestamps on the building cameras, he said. We will trace the transfer of that photograph. Someone altered the chain of custody. Matteo, bring the men. Lock down footage for the last 80 hours. No one touches evidence until I say so. His commands moved the room into motion. Then Matteo did something that made the air tilt. He reached toward my bag, and without asking, he unzipped it. His fingers moved to the pocket where I kept my things. We have to be thorough, he said. His voice lost its flatness and became a task. My hands flew up. You can't. I reached to stop him and nearly knocked over a lamp. The action broke into the room like a glass shard. Matteo's hand paused. Dante's gaze cut in hard. Nora, don't let him look. If you reclean, we clear it now. If you hide something, you will make this worse. His tone was controlled, but under it was an edge that said his patience ran on a schedule I could not read. I opened my bag because the alternative, resistance, felt like buying the lie. Matteo rifled through receipts and a small notebook. He found a folded receipt from the coffee shop with the timestamp Rosa had mentioned. He found a grocery bag receipt dated the night before. He found nothing else that tied me to the alley. He hesitated, then looked back at Dante. Matteo produced a photograph I had not seen. A feed from a neighbor's doorbell camera earlier that week. It captured someone carrying a small package cut from the same envelope under my door. The figure's face was turned away, but there was a slither of coat and a hand moving with the same deliberate pause I'd seen in the garage camera. We have a person moving toward your building the night the locket was dropped, Matteo. We are tracing their path. He did not yet say whether their path included me. The charge in the room shifted. My suspicion and fear folded into a new motion. Bargaining. I felt it as a physical thing, a tongue of calculation that made my hands steady. If someone is trying to frame me, who profits? I asked. The question demanded a name. Dante's eyes narrowed. Someone wants you to be the public face of a conflict between families, he said. If your name is spoken at the scene, they force me to respond in a way that strips you of choice. They make you a lever. He stopped speaking and then added, there are people who profit if I react to a civilian casualty. Rosa leaned forward. Do we know who planted the picture? She asked. She used my name. Her voice carried a practical urgency. Matteo rattled off 2 names I had heard in fragments in the old weeks when I still wandered in Dante's shadow. He described meetings and movements in precise times. This brought a new clarity but also a new danger. The more I knew, the more I was anchored to the fight. The interrogation tightened. Matteo me direct questions about friends who might have reason to set me up. He about an ex-boyfriend, my past employers, and whether anyone had recently shown unusual interest in me. I answered. Rosa supplied details that aligned with me. Dante watched the exchange as if he were reading notes. At one point our answers collided and Dante held up a hand to stop the flow. Enough, he said. We will follow the trace. Nora, you can stay here tonight under my roof if you prefer. He the last words with a softness that nearly undid me. Rosa's hand landed on my arm then. Steady and direct, Nora, she said. You do not have to go back to that kind of protection if you don't want to. You can stay with me. Her eyes were blunt and caring in the same line. But you should not be alone tonight. She spoke plainly, as if setting out options. I looked between them, Dante with his quiet authority, Rosa with her practical offer. I felt the scale of choice tilt. This was the chapter's peak, the place my earlier decision to answer Dante's call collided with the truth that his protection came at a price. The room hung with the decision. My fingers tightened around the locket in the envelope until the metal left a line across my skin. I thought of the nights I had left him, the reasons I had chosen small rooms with second-hand lamps. I thought of the way he smoothed his jacket when uncomfortable, the way his watch caught light. I thought of Carlo Rossi and the photograph on the table. The choice was not simple. I said, I will not be moved like an object. My words were short but steady. I accept your help tonight, Dante, but on my terms. I will keep the locket as evidence, and I will leave in the morning if there's no proof I'm tied to Carlo. I will come with Rosa when we need to move. I will answer questions. But I will not be kept like property. The last words landed like a small stone in the quiet. Dante's face changed in a minute way I had learned to read. A tightening at the jaw and a softness around his eyes I had seen only rarely. You will be safe while you are here, he said. I will not tell you everything tonight. I will not promise to stop following where the trace leads. But you will not be used as bait. He did not say he would not try to claim me. He promised containment instead. Matteo looked at his phone and nodded. We will secure footage forensics. We will check the neighbor's camera metadata and look for any edits in the photograph's file. We will check delivery logs for the paper envelope. We will run Carlo's recent movements back 72 hours. He spoke like an instrument of motion. If someone sets this with a purpose, we will know who benefits. He folded his hands. I left the penthouse later that night with the locket wrapped in tissue in my pocket. Dante walked me to the door with a distance that was new, not cold exactly, but like someone handling something fragile. Rest, he said. Do not go out unless Matteo calls. If anyone arrives, tell them to leave a note. He handed me a small card with a number penciled on it. Call this first. On the rooftop at dawn I sat with the locket cupped in my palm. The city was an iron bleed of pale light and distant traffic. Rosa was below on the fire escape, her silhouette a dark wedge near the street. The first birds began to call in a sharp, ordinary staccato. My hands trembled once when I opened the locket to check its engraving again. The small crescent scar at the clasp caught the light. I put the locket into my pocket, folded my coat around me, and climbed down toward Rosa. My decision had shifted through suspicion, through fear, through bargaining, and now into a steadier resolve. I had accepted shelter under conditions, and I had kept a piece of evidence in my palm. I would not let myself be moved without consent. I would use the locket as proof, but I would choose when and how it mattered. Rosa reached up and caught my hand on the last rung. Nora, she said, you re sure? I'm sure, I answered. I felt the word land like a hinge. I stepped onto the street and the car lights came on above us as a taxi slid past. Rosa's thumb found my wrist and squeezed once. Let's go home, Nora. We'll figure out what to do next. Her voice was low and steady. I kept the locket inside my palm until we were out of the courtyard. Then I slid it into my pocket and felt the cold press of metal against my hip. It was a small, hard promise. I breathed in the damp morning air and listened to Rosa talk as we walked toward the train station. Dante's car was parked half a block away with its lights low. He watched us from behind the windshield, not moving. I met his eyes for a second and he gave a tight nod. Someone had tried to drag me back into a dangerous orbit. I had refused to be set like a token. I had accepted a shelter with terms, and I had kept an evidence that might free me or bind me. Dawn came along the edge of the buildings and hit the rooftop where I had stood, and I took one step down toward the street with the locket warm in my pocket. Outside, Rosa, Nora, stay close. Call me if anything changes. I closed my hand once around the locket, then let it rest. The concrete beneath our shoes echoed with the city's waking. The envelope was still in my bag and would be boxed and catalogued by Matteo before noon. For now, the decision lived in my pocket and in the soft pressure of Rosa's hand on my arm. I walked on. Two men in dark suits yanked my car door open and one shoved a gloved hand toward my chest. Give it here, he said, blunt and flat. Suspicion tightened my fingers around the thin chain. I shoved my shoulder back against the seat and kept my thumb on the locket so he could not see the photograph inside. The alley smelled of oil and the last heat from the street, and the curb light threw a strip of hard amber across the pavement. I could feel the envelope from weeks before in my head, the one that had slid down the stair and stuck under my shoe, and the quiet way it had started everything. That small paper had led me to this metal circle at my throat. I kept my feet between the door and the car as if distance could make me less reachable. Nora rose sharply from the stairwell, and relief hit me like a shove that might have knocked me back into the car if I hadn't braced. Suspicion shifted into alarm as the two men narrowed their eyes toward the stair. I had not called Rosa. She appeared because she lived like a shadow 2 flights up, and because she had folded herself into my life in the blunt way friends do when danger arrives. Rosa pushed between me and the men, her knit scarf twitching. "You picked the wrong person tonight," she said, voice low and precise. One man stepped forward and said, "This won't take long. We only want the trinket you stole." The word stole landed like a physical hit. I said, "It came in an envelope at my door," and held up the locket so they could see the engraved initials. I tried to keep my voice steady. My hands trembled enough that the chain caught on my thumb. The taller man laughed, and the shorter one reached for the clasp. A long coat cut from the shadow near the glossy car at the curb. The hem moved first, then a shoe, then the rest of him stepped forward in silence. Dante's coat swallowed the light, and he took the locket from the shorter man without a word. He slid the chain between his fingers and closed my photograph inside his palm like closing a small, private book. Rosa's mouth made a small sound. "It could have been a laugh or a choke, Dante," she said, not as a question but as a check that kept the air from snapping. He did not look at me. He only held the locket up between his fingers and then tucked it into his pocket. The two men straightened and stepped back as if they had been unhooked from a leash. I walked the 3 steps to the curb before I realized I'd left the car door open. My jacket still smelled of laundry with a faint coffee stain on the cuff. I said, "Why is this yours?" "Why did they?" My question broke when Dante put a card on the hood of the car, the texture of heavy stock, his name engraved in small letters. He turned and walked away toward his car with a slow, measured gait. That moment, when the leather of his overcoat brushed the streetlight, and he moved as if nothing had happened, shifted my confusion into something that felt like need. I had been trying to understand what I loved about him when he was here. Now the thing I loved was mixed with the fact of power he still held over my life. I caught myself watching the imprint of his shoes on the wet asphalt, as if they could explain why I had kept his locket. Back in my kitchen, Rosa set the card down on the counter and slid the envelope from my shoe onto the table. "You brought this back to him, Nora," she said, and her tone made a new accusation of choice. I picked at the edge of the paper with my thumbnail. The envelope had a neat fold and a single line of ink. It had promised a small fact I thought I could hold. Now the fact felt like a tether. Rosa unfolded the card again and tapped Dante's name. "He doesn't take things people hand him for nothing," she said. "Nora, did you ask for this?" I looked at her and thought of our last conversation where I had told her about the photograph for the first time. Saying it had felt like dropping a coin into a dark fountain. Hearing it echo made me see what I had done. I left the apartment because answers live somewhere you don't expect to find them, in bars under cheap light, with people who remember names you don't want in their mouths. The bar at the docks smelled of salt and cigarette smoke, and the backroom man I had met once before emptied a bottle into a glass when I walked in. "Nora," he said without surprise. He had the look of someone who catalogued people by debts and favors. I sat on a stool at the bar and slid the locket across the counter like a small, dangerous coin. The man, he called himself Marco the first time, looked down at the photograph and then at me. "You should not have opened that," he said. "That ties you to things you do not understand." My suspicion narrowed into a simple, pulsing fear. "Who does it tie me to?" I asked Dante. I said the name because names make people real. Marco's jaw tightened. He set down his glass and said, "Dante Moretti pays for obligations." "This photograph is one of them." Marco leaned in. "You need protection or distance," he said. "You cannot be both safe and free with that in your pocket." His hands were big and stained. They were hands that could move weight without asking permission. I swallowed and remembered the way Dante had taken the locket without explanation. His calm felt like a statement rather than an offer. When I excused myself, I felt the Baron watching me. A man followed me to the restroom and then spoke through the stall door. "You opened it," he said, voice lower. "You showed the photo to anyone?" I said I had not. He knew that the photo was dated and had names written on the back in a hand that matched the ink in the envelope. "It ties him to a child," he said plainly. "It ties him to responsibility." The word responsibility changed the angle of everything. It reframed Dante's claim as more than possession. I opened the locket's clasp in the restroom and unfolded the photograph on the edge of the sink, because I needed to see it again with my hands and with water on my wrist. The photograph showed a small boy on a rooftop, a paper boat in his hands, and a number written along the edge in careful ink. The lieutenant from the docks found me as I stood, and when he put his hand on my shoulder I felt another hand in the world that knew Dante's movements. "This isn't what you think," the lieutenant said, and his voice pressed into the stall door like a hinge. He that Dante had once promised to look after that boy, that the promise had been private, and that the photograph kept a record. "He keeps paper like this as proof," the lieutenant said, "but proof can be a chain." Doubt collapsed into anger, then into clarity. I left the bar because staying meant acceptance of narratives I hadn't chosen. Rosa met me at the corner and the dawn bled pale through the alley as if the city could not decide on its own temperature. "What did they say?" she asked, and she said my name the way someone checks a fever. I told Rosa everything I could in the 2 blocks between the dock and my building. The card, the way Dante had moved, Marco's warning, the photograph of the boy. Rosa listened without interruption and then said, "Then we find out what that promise actually is. You don't hand it back unless you know what it binds you to." Her voice was firm. She used my name to keep me steady because I had a tendency to make choices when I felt needed rather than when I felt safe. We planned to go to Dante's penthouse because a place holds evidence the way people sometimes hold grudges, quietly and with layers. The doorman checked our names with a delay that felt like wait. Dante's penthouse smelled of cedar and tobacco. The elevator hummed like a contained animal. I felt the locket heavy at my collar as if it had its own center of gravity. He answered the door with a coat over his suit and a look that measured us like we were pieces of a chessboard. "Nora," he said, and his voice was low enough that the ceiling seemed to listen. He closed the door and the apartment swallowed the hallway noises. The penthouse looked the same as the first time I had seen it. Dark wood, a low table with a ring tray, a window that showed glare from a distant neon sign. He set the locket on the table without touching me. "You kept it, Dante," and he did not ask why. He my name like a soft pronouncement. "Tell me why," I said. I wanted to know what was inside. My sentence was short. I had been rehearsing it, and the rehearsal left me raw. He held my face with his eyes rather than his hands and said, "It is not yours to decide alone." The conversation narrowed into a choice, and then broadened into the history I had only seen fragments of. Dante explained, calm, precise, that the photograph belonged to a child someone in his organization had sworn to protect after a raid went wrong years ago. He that his name on certain documents made him responsible under codes I did not know. "I promised once," he said. "I keep that promise." His voice did not ask for gratitude. It framed obligation. Rosa stood at the kitchen threshold with her hands folded, the knit scarf looped once around her neck. "Obligation to you doesn't mean permission to own her choices," she said sharply, and the room tightened at her words. Dante looked at Rosa as if noticing her presence for the first time and then said, "Rosa, you know how this works. This isn't about orders. It's about keeping someone safe." Rosa stepped forward. "Keeping someone safe without their consent is kidnapping in plain clothes," she said. Her voice came out in 3 clipped sentences that made the point like struck steel. I watched Dante's fingers fold and then unfold. His manner was a slow mechanism. "Nora," he said, "this is not a cage. I will make it a protection. You will not owe me anything." The sentence landed. It was an offer wrapped in self-assuredness. I felt fear rise fast, an animal at the boundary of my chest, and then it shifted again into a different motion. A sharpening need to know what the locket's paper had told him. I said, "Then show me the paperwork. Show me what binds me to this. Show me why keeping this with me is dangerous." My voice was steadier than I felt, because saying things aloud forced them into actions. Dante went to a low cabinet and took out a slim envelope. The paper inside had neat handwriting. A date, a name, a clause that named him as a guarantor for the child's safety. It was a legal-looking note in a private registry. He put the paper on the table and looked at me. "It says I am responsible until the boy turns 18, or until a formal transfer happens," he said. The locket was left as a sign to the child that someone remembers him. I read the note. The ink was precise. The words were concrete. The obligation was real in a way that did not let me walk away easily. I looked at Dante and then at the photograph again. "If you promised, then why did you come to my car and take it from the men?" I asked. He held my gaze and replied, "Because the men were not authorized. They meant to use force and to leverage the locket to press a claim. I stopped them before they escalated." A rapid exchange followed, 3 short lines of back and forth that shifted the tension into negotiation. "You left it in my stairwell," I said. "You could have come to me." "I couldn't. It was the only way to contact you without exposing him." "Dante, expose who?" "Rosa, the boy," Dante replied. "Not his name to you yet." The revelation that a child's safety was at stake rearranged my moral balance. The mid-chapter edge returned when a sharp knock sounded at the penthos door as if the city had a timing device. Dante's head turned. "Don't open that," he said to me with a quickness that removed any pretense of calm. Someone outside called his name in a voice I did not recognize. Rosa's fingers tightened on the edge of the countertop. I felt her watch me like a harbor watchman watches a single light. Dante moved to the door and peered through the peephole before opening it a sliver. A man I had seen in the alley stood there with a message and a small paper slip. He handed it to Dante and left without comment. Dante read it and his face lost color for the briefest instant. He turned back to us and said, "They found a ledger. They think it implicates my office in a split I did not authorize. They will come for anyone connected to the proof. That includes anyone who has the locket." The sentence was factual. It carried a new set of measurable consequences. I felt the air in the room change because numbers and ledgers mean procedures. For the first time that night I made a decision aimed at my own agency rather than reaction. I said, "I keep the locket for now." My voice was plain. "I keep it because I want to know who he is and why you promised. If this drags me into danger, I'll find a way out with Rosa." Dante stared at me, and something almost like a smile flickered at his mouth. It did not reach his eyes. "You may not like what you learn," he warned. We left the penthouse together when the city was still rubbing sleep from its face. Outside, the street had the thin early light that separates night from day and makes details sharper. Rosa and I walked 2 blocks in silence, planning the first steps. Call a lawyer, contact Rosa New, track the ledger rumor, and find the boy's last known address. Every step felt like moving a chess piece in plain view. At the building entrance, Rosa took my hand and squeezed it once. "Nora," she said, "you a dangerous question, and you kept the answer. We'll do this together." Her grip was a promise of labor, not of rescue. I stepped into my apartment and closed the door behind me, the lock clicking like a small, private punctuation. I set the locket on the table and slid the envelope under it so the 2 items touched. I could still feel the smell of tobacco and cedar from Dante's penthouse on my sweater. The city hummed distant and mechanical beyond the thin walls. I thought of the envelope that had hit the stair weeks ago, and how that little paper had unspooled half my life into this moment. Outside, a car door closed 2 buildings down, a sound that could have been coincidence but that landed on me with intent. Rosa called out my name once, then left. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the locket one more time, looked at the boy's small face in the photograph, and made a concrete choice. I would hold the locket as evidence and as a promise to learn what obligation meant in practice. I would keep it close enough to see and far enough to measure. The evening had not ended with tidy answers. It ended with a plan and with a new danger that wore paperwork instead of a gun. I folded the note Dante had shown me and slid it back into the envelope. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket and stood by the door. A car engine idled somewhere along the street, then moved away. I heard the soft click of steps on the stair and the metal rattle of a key in the lock below. Someone had left a card under my door. I reached for it and felt the paper between my fingers, ready to open it and see what claim would come next. Emotion roots. Suspicion guided my first reaction and made me hold the locket tight. Fear pushed me away and toward escape. Clarity came when the photograph and the paperwork aligned and forced a decision. The chapter closes with a tangible beat. I slide Dante's card back into my pocket and open the envelope again, an action that links me forward to the next choice. I leave the kitchen light on and the locket on the table, and then I go to the door and pick up the card someone has slipped beneath it. Because answers now come with names and fingerprints and the sound of other people's shoes on the stair. A gloved hand slides a heavy black envelope under my door while a luxury car hums at the curb with its lights off. Suspicion tightens my fingers around the flap before I bend to lift it. I feel the weight of the paper, the precise crease along its corner. My chest moves shallow. I count the breaths because Rosa taught me to ground myself when my thoughts begin to spin. The envelope is addressed in a single, neat hand. A time, a penthouse floor number, no name. The central problem is clear inside those 3 details. Someone who belongs to Dante wants me to come back into his world and answer why he left me there. I slide the envelope into my pocket and walk into the tiny kitchen where the kettle has begun to rattle on its own. The city noises leak through the window, the tap of a deliveryman's boots, a late night bus braking. I move more because I must show movement than because I believe the invitation. Suspicion drives me and suspicion will make me act. That suspicion has guided every careful choice I've made since the locket arrived months ago. It pushed me to keep the chain tucked beneath my shirt the night the 2 men in dark suits pulled my car door open. It pushed me to hold the photograph inside the locket until my thumb bruised it. Rosa appears at the door with 2 paper cups of coffee and a jacket thrown over one shoulder like an accusation you opened it. She asks, voice clipped. She drops the cups on the counter and folds her arms the way she does when she wants me to stop circling a dangerous idea. Her presence changes the room. Her feet plant and the air tightens, not in mood but because she blocks the exit. I hand her the envelope without words. Rosa reads the address, the time. She smooths the flap with one finger and looks up. He's calling you, she says, pronouncing it like a fact and like a threat. You know why he'd do this now? Her jaw presses. Her voice carries practical anger, anger that names the risk. That exact anger is why I trust her. Maybe he wants the locket back, I say, because saying it reduces the rumor into an object. I keep my hand on the pocket where the chain is tucked. My mouth forms the word as if I can make the motive ordinary. Doubt slants through me. Did he send it to pull me into a trap, or to offer an apology? I feel the first emotion shift, suspicion of brittle hope. I fling a mug at that hope and watch it land on the counter between us. Rosa sets her coffee down and outlines a plan in 3 short sentences. We go. We go together. You don't go alone. She says my name when she speaks it. Nora, as though that gives the order weight. She taps the envelope. We take the subway to avoid his drivers. We make him wait or we walk in. Either way, we take control. Her voice is brisk. Her choices are concrete. She fills the room with decisions the way a carpenter fills a frame with nails. I stare at the kettle's whistle, at the slight burn ring on our chipped mug where Dant once set his palm and left an oil mark. The memory is a small, sharp detail, his fingers warm on ceramic, a thumb brushing the crescent scar at my eyebrow. That precise touch is one of the things absence has polished into something I almost believe is proof of love. I cover my mouth with my hand and feel the old rhythm of wanting to forgive. Rosa's hand tightens on my sleeve. Nora, you promised me you wouldn't do this alone. You promised. Her voice softens then, and the only thing that changes is how I imagine the car idling outside the building, nearer now, as if waiting. We leave the kettle boiling and the envelope in the pocket of my jacket. We take the subway as Rosa insisted, and the city swallows us in fluorescent light and the clack of rail. On the train, my suspicion hardens into a new edge when I remember the men who opened my car door months ago. I watch a pair of commuters and practice the brief, controlled facial expressions Dante used when he didn't want anyone to read him. The second emotion shift comes when the train jolts and someone drops a phone. I startle and then laugh out of place. Fear slides into anger. Fear that he'll use my presence as an admission. Anger because he chose distance instead of honesty. We arrive at the building and a porter scans us with a glance that says he expects trouble. A man in a dark suit clips across the lobby and touches his earpiece. He says one word, names. He says it like a scanner. I say mine. Rosa says hers. The man writes the names down, then nods to a uniformed guard who produces 2 waiting coats. We are escorted toward an elevator that smells faintly of lemon polish and leather. The corridor is quiet, too quiet for this part of the city where elevator chatter usually fills small spaces. My palms sweat. I slide my hand into my pocket where the locket rests against my thigh like a small, heavy coin. The lieutenant who meets us at the penthouse threshold is Mason, tall, broad-shouldered, the sort who moves like he owns the air in front of him. He bows his head in a way that summons courtesy and then puts it away. Mise Olveres, he says, if reminding me of my place, Mins. Bennett, he opens the door with a flat motion. The corridor beyond glows with low amber lights. The floor is the same black marble I remember from the last time I stood beneath it. The corridor smell is cedar and something sweet and medicinal. Each step makes the sound of my shoes on marble like a repetition of an old, compelled ritual. We pass a line of silent security glass. A car is parked inside the garage below, its contours familiar. I force my feet to move. The third emotion shift arrives now. Anger, resignation. I tell myself the resignation is a strategy. I will sit and listen and then leave. I will not let absence keep dictating the value I assign to him. Inside the penthouse lounge, Dant appears in the doorway with the slow surety that once made me forgive everything before I knew the cost. He is wearing a long wool overcoat buttoned against the night. The scar along his jaw is pale under the soft light. He puts an object on the table with a gesture so controlled I notice the movement before I understand it. A paperweight old glass with a photograph sealed inside. He does not ask me to sit. He does not reach for my hand. He stands as if he could crush the room into silence by shifting his weight. Nora. He says my name the way he once used to name small pleasures. As if cataloging them. Thank you for coming. He keeps his voice low. It is the same low velvet I remember, and I feel that brittle awareness, how that voice used to smooth the jagged edges of whatever he wanted. I didn't expect you to bring company. His eyes flick to Rosa and then back to me with no apology. Rosa answers before I can. He sent the envelope. She says, and the words are a challenge now. He could have come to you if this was about repair. Why call this theater? Her voice is blunt. She slaps the object on the table with a hand that leaves the coffee's warmth. That sound is an external event. It shifts the room. Dante's jaw tightens. I did not want to put you in danger, he says. He folds his hands and then smooths his jacket the way he does when he is about to give bad news. There were reasons I had to leave. Reasons you would not accept, and I could not explain. I say what I have rehearsed in nights of insomnia. You left. You disappeared. Then people followed me. Men in suits opened my car door. Someone shoved a hand at my chest for a locket. Did you set that up to justify your absence? The words come like a blade. I say, you, in sharp syllables. He flinches the smallest amount. Then he answers without deflection. I ordered protections, Nora. I ordered them because someone was watching you. I gave orders to keep you away from my world and from my enemies, he says. My enemies, like a fact he cannot erase. I thought distance would keep you safe. I thought not explaining would be better than exposing you to risk. Rosa cuts in, so you orchestrated violence. She speaks and then the room tilts into confrontation. You sent men to yank her car door open. You sent the envelope that ended with my friend finding a photo she was not ready to see. Her lines come fast now. 3 hard strikes. You think distance is protection, Dante. Dante squares his shoulders. We did what we had to do, he says it plainly. Then he offers a detail that changes something small and precise. The men were told to be rough without brandishing weapons. Their orders were to frighten, not hurt. The revelation lands like a metallic clink in a quiet room. It is a twist but not the one I wanted. Still, it reframes the earlier night. My throat narrows. I reach for the locket. The photograph in my head, Dante's fingers, a streetlight, the hand at my chest, shifts in scale like a close-up discovering a new object. This is the moment where understanding and suspicion cross blades. I feel fear flare and then condense into a cold, hard question. Did he accept a risk so he could guard his empire, even if guarding it meant using me as a pawn? I speak then. Why the locket? I demand, why put a picture in a chain and expect me to carry it like proof? My voice is raw. I reach across the table and pick up the paperweight he left. The glass is warm from his palm. Inside is a photograph of us at a fair, my hair loose, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing. In the picture there is no distance. The moment is ordinary and dangerous for being ordinary. He leans forward a fraction because I couldn't stand the idea of losing you in darkness. Because even when I could not speak, I wanted a way to remind you that at least once I held you where it was safe. I know it is not an excuse. He says this with a voice that reveals an admission. He chose a way to control the narrative. The room narrows. Mason stands in the doorway like an invested witness. Outside, cars move in a slow clip, muffled. I feel another emotion shift. Resignation turns into outrage. My hands curl into fists. You chose control over honesty. I say, you chose to arrange things rather than tell me the truth. You let men frighten me. That was choice. My words are short. They hit. Dante's face changes. Then, in a quiet, precise gesture, he slides an envelope across the table. Inside is a list of names and short notes, dates, places, small explanations in his handwriting. He does not try to soften the list. The list names people I did not know were connected to him. It names decisions that read like business memos. Who to recruit, who to exile, who to watch. There is a line that reads, protect Nora, minimize exposure. If exposure necessary, frighten to deter, avoid weapon use. The sentence is clinical. It is the moment a motive becomes a method. Rosa reads the list out loud and then throws it back onto the table. You hid this, she says. You hid it from her. Her voice breaks once and then recovers. She is angry in a way that wants to dismantle Nora. He chose it. He chose to manipulate your safety into a ledger entry. Dante meets Rosa's gaze, and then mine. I thought if you knew the truth it would make you a target. I thought if you understood the business side, you would never forgive me and you would be in more danger. So I made a decision I now regret. He uses regret as a measurement, but the room senses it is not enough. I will offer you a choice tonight, he says. Return to a protected life under what I can provide, or walk away without connection to my world. Both are safety options. One is control with security. One is freedom with risk. The offer is precise, surgical. It leaves no warm middle. It forces the impossible choice the outline promised. My mind catalogues consequences. Staying gives physical safety but ties me to a man who hides things. Leaving gives autonomy but also invites unknown danger from those who now know I exist in his orbit. My fingers close on the locket so hard I feel the chain dig into my palm. I look at Rosa. She stares back with a face I have known since childhood, loyal, practical, and unwilling to sugarcoat what leaving will cost. I ask the blunt question I have rehearsed until my mouth is raw. If I choose to stay, what does that look like? I speak Nora's name to stop the room from sliding into Dante's frame. Nora asks, "Do I get a voice in my life? Do I get to say no to your methods?" Dante answers directly, "You get protection. You get a safe place. You will not be asked to sign legal papers that force you into anything. You will have a choice each day, but you will live with people who answer to me. Your freedom will be narrower physically, broader in other ways. I cannot promise the world won't see your presence." He says the last line slowly. "I can only promise I will cut anyone who threatens you out of the picture." Rosa's jaw tightens so visibly her neck flexes. "What he says is obvious marketing," she replies. "Nora, think about what happened the night your car door opened. Think about how they said, 'Give it here,' like they owned your body. Think about how close they came. Staying is not safety if the structure that produced that violence remains intact." Dante's mouth forms a short shape. "Rosa, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm telling the truth. If she wants to leave, I will not cage her." He says Nora's name once slowly, and it sounds like an apology and a claim at the same time. The argument ramps. They trade 3 rapid lines. "Rosa, Nora, you can't let him frame your decision as safety." Dante, "I am offering a door, not a cage." Nora, "Then tell me why you didn't tell me first." Dante, "Because I thought not telling you would protect you." Nora, "It didn't." My voice cracks. This is the confrontation I have wanted and dreaded. The room presses in again. Mason moves but does not speak. The photograph on the table glints in the low light. Dante steps back then and makes a private gesture. He removes his signet ring and places it on the table beside the glass paperweight. The ring is heavy, engraved, a thing that symbolizes claim. He does not voice an explanation for the gesture. Instead it reads as a small, precise signal: regret, perhaps, and recognition that he cannot have both his empire and the honest love he might have wanted. Rosa grips my sleeve and pulls me toward the door. "Nora, let's go, now." Before it becomes something else again, her hand is firm. She talks fast, placing the next external event in motion. "Take the subway. We'll go home. We'll move the locket and the list into a safe. We'll decide tomorrow with cold heads, not here." Not now. I hesitate because there is a temptation to stay and to let absence keep polishing Dante into an impossible thing. The temptation is not an abstract longing. It is the shape of the photograph and the remembered weight of his hand on my shoulder. I feel the last emotion shift, out of temptation into clarity. I choose the clarity by letting my hand slide off the table and into Rosa's. The choice is a small physical act. "I stand, Dante," I say, and I pronounce his name like an address. "I won't let your absence choose for me anymore. I won't trade my right to ask for truth every day. You can offer protection, you can offer care, but you will not call the decisions you make for me safety and expect me to accept them without question." He studies me. His eyes are steady, then walk away. He says, "If that is your choice, walk. I will not follow, I will not beg. I will make arrangements for your safety as best I can without constraining you further. If you later ask to return, I will answer. The words are not a surrender. They are a boundary." I breathe. The room tilts, and then the motion stops. There is no dramatic plea. There is only the small ticket of a decision being cashed. Outside, dawn is starting to push color into the sky. We leave the penthouse with Mason watching us to the elevator. There is no show of violence, no dramatic chase. Just the hum of the city waking. In the lobby, the porter nods to us like an observer of an old ritual. Rosa keeps close, fingers hooked in my sleeve. We take the subway again, then walk the last few blocks with the weight of the list between us, as if its paper could break under light. On the rooftop, the sky shades from warm amber to cool blue. I sit on a low marble ledge and set the locket beside a small folded letter I write in a hand that is steadier than I feel. The letter lists the facts I need to keep: what happened, what I saw, what I will accept. I tuck the paperweight photo next to the locket. The action is concrete. I am not erasing memory, I am cataloging it. Rosa stands at my shoulder and says my name softly. "You did well," she says, and she does not let the line soften into a clitch. She hands me a travel mug. We watch a city that keeps making choices it will not account for. I put the locket on the ledge and close my fingers over it once, then let go. A cab passes below with black, tinted windows. Somewhere, a different world continues on. I fold the letter and slide it under the locket's chain so it will stay put. I stand. The last concrete moment arrives. I pick up the locket and the folded paper, place them side by side, and leave them on the marble. The action marks the end. I lock my fingers into Rosa's and we step down from the rooftop into the crowd walking toward morning. My choice is not a shout of triumph. It is a small, clear movement away from the penthouse into the uncertain daylight. that movement is the end of this chapter.